The night before Mother's Day, I found out I had been erased from my own family with one quiet tap on a screen. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my apartment in Virginia, still wearing my school cardigan, papers from my fourth grade class spread across the quilt, when my cousin Rachel called me close to midnight. Her voice sounded wrong right away. Too careful. Too thin. "Ingrid," she said, "I need you to check WhatsApp." My stomach tightened before I even opened the app. The family group chat was gone. Not muted, not archived. Gone. For a second, I thought maybe I'd clicked something by accident. Maybe my phone had glitched. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But then, Rachel sent the screenshots. One after another. And there it was. My mother's message. Clear, polished, cold. Mother's Day dinner tomorrow at 7. All my children will be there. All my successful children. Ingrid chose a lowly teacher life. I no longer consider her my daughter. Please don't bring up her name. I read it once, then again. Then I stared at the words until they stopped looking like language and started feeling like a door closing. Below it, my sister Victoria had replied with a heart. My brother Bradley wrote, "Understood, Mom." That was all. No one asked if she was serious. No one defended me. No one said my name. I didn't cry. That's the part people never believe. They think a moment like that should come with screaming or shaking or some dramatic collapse. But what I felt was quieter than that. It was the kind of hurt that drains the noise right out of you. I looked around my apartment at the cheap lamp on the side table, the stack of spelling quizzes waiting to be graded, the mug with pencils in it, the life I had built on a teacher's salary, and for the first time, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. My family hadn't rejected me all at once. They had been doing it in pieces. If you're listening right now, tell me where you're listening from. Because that was the night I stopped trying to earn a seat at their table. And the truth is, it hadn't started with that text. It had started long before my mother decided to put it in writing. It didn't begin with that message. It began with a table. Thanksgiving, the year before everything fell apart. My mother's dining room looked exactly the way it always did. Polished wood, crystal glasses catching the light, place cards written in her careful cursive, everything in its place. Except me. My name wasn't at the main table. It was on a smaller folding table in the corner, the one usually reserved for kids. My sister's stepchildren were already sitting there, swinging their legs, arguing over who got which chair. "Oh, honey," my mother said when she saw me hesitate. "We just ran out of space. You don't mind, do you? You're so good with children." I was 30 years old. I nodded anyway, sat down, smiled when expected, passed the gravy when asked. That's the thing about being the easy one in the family. You learn how to disappear without making anyone uncomfortable. But moments like that don't go away. They settle somewhere deep, quiet, waiting. Christmas was worse. I had spent 3 weeks knitting my mother a scarf. Real cashmere yarn, soft gray, the exact shade she liked. I stayed up late most nights after grading papers, hands sore, counting stitches carefully so it would be perfect. When she opened it, she smiled. That thin, polite smile. "How handmade," she said. Then she turned to Victoria, who handed her a designer clutch, and suddenly the room filled with admiration. The stitching, the brand, the elegance. My scarf sat beside her, untouched. 2 months later, I found it in the coat closet, still folded, still wrapped, like something temporary, like something she planned to return but never got around to. I didn't say anything. I never said anything, because a part of me kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I just proved myself a little more, maybe one day I'd be enough for her. But here's the truth I didn't want to face back then. It was never about effort. It was about value. And in my family, value had a price tag. Doctor, lawyer, status. Not teacher. Not me. If you've ever been the one in the family who didn't measure up in their eyes, you already know how this feels. You don't fight back. You shrink. And you wait for love that keeps moving further away. I didn't become a teacher by accident. That's the part my family never cared to understand. When I graduated high school, I had a 4.1 gigapascals and a full scholarship offer to study pre-med at the University of Virginia. My mother had already told everyone at her country club. She had a script ready for my life, and for once, I had followed it. At least, that's what she thought. That summer, before college started, I volunteered at a literacy camp for kids in our county. It was supposed to be temporary, just something to fill the time. But then I met a boy named Marcus Jr. He was 8 years old and couldn't read past a first grade level. Every time it was his turn, he'd freeze. His shoulders would curl in like he was trying to make himself smaller. "They say I'm slow," he told me once, not even looking up. I sat with him every day. We started with simple words, then sentences, then pages. It took weeks. But one afternoon, he picked up a copy of Charlotte's Web and started reading out loud without stopping. No hesitation, no fear. When he finished the chapter, he looked at me like he didn't recognize himself anymore. Then he hugged me so tightly I almost lost my balance. That was the moment everything shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, just quietly, like something inside me clicked into place. That night, I called my mother. "I'm not doing pre-med," I said. There was silence on the line. 17 seconds. I remember, because I counted. "I'm going to study education," I continued. "I want to teach." When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, controlled. "You're throwing your life away. For what?" she added. "A government salary and ungrateful children?" I tried to explain. I tried to tell her what it felt like to watch a child believe in themselves for the first time. But she wasn't listening. She had already decided what my choice meant. Less money, less status, less worth. She didn't come to my college graduation. Said she had a garden event. Victoria sent a card with a $50 check and wrote, "Good luck with your little career." I cashed the check. I needed groceries. But I never forgot what it really said underneath. "You chose wrong. You chose less." And from that point on, everything I did was measured against that decision. Not by what it meant to me, but by how it looked to them. And slowly, without ever saying it out loud, they started treating me like I had already failed. By the time that message showed up in the family group chat, the truth is, I wasn't surprised. Not really. Hurt, yes, deeply. But surprised? No. Because exclusion in my family didn't arrive like a storm. It came in drafts, small, steady, easy to ignore if you kept telling yourself it didn't mean anything. Like my mother's birthday dinner, just a few months before everything broke. I remember calling her that afternoon, standing in the hallway outside my classroom while my students lined up for dismissal. "What time should I be there tonight?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, Ingrid," she said, in that soft, rehearsed voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. The restaurant only had 6 seats available. I did the math in my head instantly. Her, my father, Victoria, Bradley, their spouses. 6. "And?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You understand, don't you?" she added quickly. "We had to prioritize immediate family." Immediate family. I stood there in the hallway, children's voices echoing around me, my hand gripping the phone just a little tighter. "I am your immediate family," I said, but it came out quieter than I intended. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she sighed, lightly, like I was making things harder than they needed to be. "Don't make this into something it isn't," she said. "We'll celebrate another time." We never did. That night, I ate takeout alone at my kitchen table, graded spelling tests between bites, tried not to picture them sitting together under warm restaurant lighting, laughing, clinking glasses, telling stories that didn't include me. That's how it worked. You weren't removed all at once. You were edited out, little by little, until one day, the version of the family that included you didn't exist anymore. And what made it worse wasn't just what my mother did. It was how easily everyone else adjusted. Victoria never questioned it. Bradley never pushed back. No one said, "Wait, where's Ingrid?" They just shifted, rearranged, like I had always been optional, like I had always been extra. And maybe that was the hardest part to accept. Not that my mother disapproved of me, but that no one else thought it was worth challenging her. By the time I sat on my bed that night in May, staring at that message, I no longer consider her my daughter. It didn't feel like a sudden loss. It felt like the final confirmation of something that had been happening all along. A sentence I hadn't wanted to finish reading, until she wrote it for me. I stayed up until almost 2 in the morning that night, not crying, not pacing, just reading, over and over again. The same message, the same words, the same timestamps. Like if I stared at them long enough, something might shift. Some hidden meaning might appear that made it less final than it felt. It never did. My mother's message sat there, unchanged. Cold, deliberate, public. And what kept catching in my chest wasn't just what she said. It was what no one else said. No hesitation from Victoria. No confusion from Bradley. No one asking if this had gone too far. Just a quiet agreement that I could be erased, and life would move on without interruption. Around 2:07 a.m., I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time, I stopped asking why. I stopped trying to understand her. Stopped replaying every conversation, every holiday, every moment I thought maybe I had misread. Because the truth was already in front of me, clearer than it had ever been. She didn't want me in her life. And the rest of them were fine with that. So the question changed. Not why did she do this, but what am I going to do now? I had options. I could call her, demand an explanation, force a conversation she had already chosen to avoid. I could send the screenshots back to the group, make them sit with what they had allowed. I could show up to that Mother's Day dinner uninvited. Walk in, take a seat, make it impossible for them to pretend I didn't exist. For a few minutes I imagined it. The silence when I entered the room. The looks on their faces. My mother trying to maintain control. And me refusing to play along. But then what? What would I actually gain from that? An apology she didn't mean? A seat at a table that had already decided I didn't belong? I turned onto my side, pulled the blanket up, and closed my eyes, and that's when it settled. Not as anger. Not even as sadness. Just a quiet, steady decision. If my mother wanted me gone, then I would be gone. Completely. But not because she pushed me out, because I chose to leave. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No messages. No calls. No Happy Mother's Day reminder. Nothing. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't send her flowers. Didn't call. Didn't pretend. I made coffee. Sat by the window. Watched the sunlight hit the creek behind my apartment. And then, one by one, I started blocking numbers. My mother. Victoria. Bradley. Each tap felt small, but permanent. I deleted Instagram that same afternoon. I didn't want to see their version of a family that no longer included me. I didn't know then how long the silence would last. I didn't know it would stretch into years. All I knew was this. I was done asking for love from people who only offered it when I fit their expectations. The silence didn't feel dramatic the way I thought it would. No final speech, no slammed doors, no moment where I declared anything out loud. It was quieter than that. Just days passing, without them. The first week, I kept reaching for my phone out of habit, thinking I might have missed something. A message, a call, even a mistake. There was nothing. By the second week, the absence started to settle into something more permanent. And then Rachel called. "Hey," she said softly, like she wasn't sure how to enter my world anymore. "I just wanted to check on you." "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time, it wasn't a lie I was forcing. There was a pause. "They posted Thanksgiving photos," she added. I closed my eyes. I told myself I wouldn't look. I said, "Don't," she replied quickly. "Seriously, it's not worth it." But curiosity is a quiet kind of self-sabotage. 3 hours later, I opened Victoria's Instagram. The photo was exactly what you'd expect. My mother at the head of the table, crystal glasses, perfect lighting, everyone dressed like they belonged in a magazine spread. The caption read, "Grateful for my amazing family. Mom, you raised us right." Us. 3 people, not 4. And what struck me wasn't that I was missing. It was that nothing looked like it was missing. They hadn't left an empty chair. They hadn't acknowledged the gap. They had simply adjusted. Like the table had always been meant for them and never for me. I stared at that image longer than I should have. Then, I closed the app. Deleted it again. And this time, I didn't reinstall it. Rachel kept me updated after that, though I never asked her to. "She's telling people you're in Africa," Rachel said during one call, her voice edged with disbelief. "What?" I sat up straighter. "Yeah, some education nonprofit. Says you're doing international work. That's why you can't come home." I let out a short, hollow laugh. "She's rewriting me," I said. "She's protecting her image," Rachel corrected gently. That landed differently. Because it wasn't about me. Not really. It never had been. It was about what I represented. Every time someone asked about her children, she needed a story that made her look successful. A surgeon. A lawyer. And now, a humanitarian. Something impressive. Something she could say out loud without lowering her voice. The real version of me, the teacher in a small rural school 90 miles away, didn't fit that narrative. So she replaced it. And for the first time, instead of feeling hurt, I felt clarity. Not everything broken needs to be repaired. Some things need to be seen clearly, so you can finally stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. I met Marcus Webb on a Tuesday morning in October, surrounded by pumpkins, hay bales, and 24 overly excited fourth graders. It was supposed to be a simple field trip. Maple Creek Elementary did one every fall, local farms, hands-on learning, something to break up the routine. The bus ride alone had been chaos. Kids shouting, trading snacks, asking if goats would bite. Normal, easy, safe. Marcus was waiting by the fence when we arrived, leaning against a wooden post like he'd been there for a while. Tall, quiet, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but somehow held it anyway. "You must be Miss Fairbanks," he said when I stepped off the bus. "Guilty," I smiled. He nodded toward the kids. "My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you." That caught me off guard. "Lily?" I asked. His expression softened immediately. "Yeah, that's her." Lily was 5, golden curls, bright eyes, and a habit of asking questions that went 3 layers deeper than anyone expected. She wasn't in my class. I taught 4th grade, but I tutored her twice a week after school. Her mother had passed away the year before. "She's incredible," I said, curious about everything. Marcus looked at me like he was trying to decide something. "She says you make things make sense," he replied. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The field trip passed in a blur, kids picking apples, asking endless questions, trying to sneak extra cider when they thought I wasn't looking. But I noticed something. Marcus paid attention. Not in a showy way. Not like he was trying to impress anyone. Just present. When a kid struggled to carry a basket, he stepped in quietly. When Lily ran up to show him something, he knelt down like it mattered. When I explained something to the group, he actually listened. That kind of attention feels different when you've spent years being overlooked. At the end of the trip, as the kids loaded back onto the bus, he walked over. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For seeing her," he replied. "Most people just don't." Something in my chest shifted, because I knew exactly what that felt like. The next time we spoke, it wasn't about a field trip. It was about coffee. Then it was about books. Then it was about life. And one afternoon, sitting under an old oak tree at the edge of his property, he asked about my family. I didn't hesitate. "I don't have one," I said. "Or at least, not one that has me." He didn't ask for details. Didn't push. He just handed me a slice of homemade apple pie and said, "Family isn't always who you're born into." I looked at him. "Sometimes," he added, "it's who stays." And for the first time in a long time, I believed that might be true. Marcus didn't try to fix my story. He didn't ask for timelines, didn't analyze what my mother had done, didn't offer advice wrapped in logic. He just stayed. And that changed everything. We started seeing each other regularly after that fall. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic, just small, steady moments that began to stack into something real. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks along the edge of his property, where the trees opened up just enough to let the sky stretch wide. And Lily, she decided early on that I belonged. Not in a loud way, just quietly, the way children do when they trust you. One evening, I was helping her sound out words from a picture book. She stumbled over one, frowned, and looked up at me. "You're better than Google," she said. I laughed. "High praise." She nodded seriously. "You don't make me feel wrong." That stayed with me, because that's all I had ever wanted growing up. Not perfection, not approval, just not to feel like I was constantly getting it wrong. Marcus watched that moment from the doorway. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, he said, "You're good for her." I shrugged. "She's easy to love." He shook his head gently. "No, you make it easy for her to feel loved." That difference mattered more than I could explain. For a long time, I had believed love had conditions. Unspoken ones. Perform well. Choose correctly. Represent the family the right way. Then maybe you get to stay. But with them, with Marcus, with Lily, there were no conditions. No scorecard. No silent comparisons. Just presence. And slowly, without even realizing it at first, I started to change. I stopped checking my phone out of habit. stopped wondering what my family was doing, stopped imagining conversations that would never happen. The silence that once felt heavy began to feel peaceful, like a room I could finally breathe in. 2 years passed that way. Not perfectly. There were still nights when old memories surfaced. Still moments when I questioned whether I had been too harsh, too distant, too final. But those moments didn't last. Because every morning I woke up in a life where I wasn't being measured. And that kind of stability, it rebuilds something in you. In 2022, Marcus and I got married. No ballroom, no guest list to impress. Just a small ceremony under that same oak tree where everything had started. Lily stood between us, holding both our hands like she was anchoring something. And when it was over, she looked up at me and said, "Now you're really my mom." No conditions. No hesitation. Just truth. And for the first time in my life, family felt like something that chose me back. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. It became steady. And there's a difference. The kind of steady where mornings start with packing lunches, checking Lily's homework, and coffee that's usually gone cold before you finish it. The kind where your days are full, your evenings are loud, and your heart isn't constantly bracing for disappointment. I stayed at Maple Creek Elementary. Same classrooms, same chipped desks, same kids who needed more than the system was built to give them. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Not to my mother. Not to anyone. I just showed up. Every day. And that consistency started to matter. Test scores improved. Reading levels climbed. Kids who used to sit silent in the back of the room started raising their hands. Not because I was extraordinary, but because I stayed long enough to understand them. That's something people underestimate about teaching. It's not about being impressive. It's about being present. I started a small after-school mentorship program for struggling readers. Nothing official at first, just a few kids, a few extra hours, a lot of patience. Within a year, it had grown into something bigger than I expected. Other teachers joined. Parents noticed. The school board took interest. Marcus was already on the board by then, but he made it very clear he stepped back from any decisions involving me. "You earned this on your own," he told me. "It needs to stay that way." And it did. I applied for the assistant principal position when it opened up. I didn't expect much, but I got it. Then I went back to school myself. Late nights, online classes, papers written at the kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed. Marcus beside me, working through his own paperwork, occasionally sliding a cup of tea in my direction without saying a word. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. But it was mine. Every step of it. By the time 2024 came around, I had stopped thinking about my old life entirely, not because I had forgotten, but because it no longer defined me. Then, one Thursday afternoon, my office phone rang. "Mrs. Webb?" a formal voice asked. "This is Ingrid. This is Diana Morrison from the Virginia Department of Education." I sat up straighter. "We've reviewed your application," she continued, "and we'd like to formally offer you the position of superintendent for Clark County." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "Superintendent?" I repeated. "Yes. Your work in literacy development and teacher retention, it's been recognized at the state level." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Because in that moment, everything collided. The version of me my mother dismissed. The version of me I had quietly rebuilt. And the reality standing in front of me now. "You earned this," the woman said, as if she could hear the weight of it on the other end. When I hung up, I just sat there. Hands still. Breath shallow. Not because I needed validation anymore, but because for the first time, the world had seen me clearly. Without my family's permission, the announcement went public 2 weeks later. It wasn't a big feature, just a modest article in a regional paper, my photo, a short summary of my work, a headline about a local educator stepping into a leadership role. I didn't think much of it. To me, it was just the next step. But I underestimated how far something like that travels. Rachel called me that evening. "Ingrid," she said, breathless, "you're in the family group chat again." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "Victoria posted the article," she said. She wrote, "Isn't this our Ingrid?" Our Ingrid. The words felt strange, like trying on something that didn't belong to me anymore. "What did Mom say?" I asked. There was a pause. "She didn't reply in the chat," Rachel said slowly. "But she called Victoria immediately. I was at Aunt Patricia's. I heard part of it." "And?" Rachel exhaled. She's furious. I leaned back in my chair. Not because she's proud, Rachel added. Because she's been telling everyone you're in Africa. Now there's proof you've been here the whole time. Of course. Not concern. Not regret. Damage control. 3 days later, I received an email. The subject line read, "From your mother." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "My dearest Ingrid," it began. That alone felt dishonest. "I saw the wonderful news about your promotion. I always knew you had it in you. We should meet for lunch soon. I'd love to hear everything you've accomplished. With Mother's Day approaching, it would mean so much to have the whole family together again." I read it twice, then a third time, looking for something. An acknowledgement. A reference to the message. Anything that resembled accountability. There was nothing. No apology. No mention of the 4 years of silence. No recognition of what she had done. Just an invitation. As if I had simply been away. As if nothing had happened. I closed the email. Didn't respond. A week later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ing." "It's Victoria." Her voice was warm, carefully warm. "I know it's been a while," she continued, "but Mom's been asking about you. She hasn't been feeling well. She really wants to see you." I closed my eyes. "What's wrong with her?" I asked. "Oh, nothing serious," she said quickly. "Just stress. You know how she gets." "Stress, not remorse." "She misses you," Victoria added softly. I didn't answer right away, because something in her tone didn't match her words. So that night, I called Rachel. "Is Mom actually sick?" I asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "She was at the spa yesterday," she said flatly. "Posted a whole thing about eucalyptus steam." I let out a slow breath. There it was. Not love. Not regret. Opportunity. "They're not reaching out because they miss you," Rachel said gently. "I know," I replied. And this time, it didn't hurt the way it used to. It just made everything clearer. The doubts didn't hit me all at once. They came quietly, in the middle of normal days. At work, people kept congratulating me. Handshakes, smiles, conversations about the future of the district, plans, expectations, excitement. And then, inevitably, the question would come. "Your parents must be so proud." I learned how to smile through it, how to nod just enough to move the conversation along. But every time I heard it, something small tightened in my chest. Because pride had never been the problem. Condition had. That night, after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table while Marcus rinsed dishes and Lily worked through her spelling words out loud, mispronouncing half of them with absolute confidence. The house was warm, lived in, safe, and still. My mind drifted. "You're somewhere else," Marcus said without turning around. I exhaled slowly. "Victoria called," I said. "She said Mom misses me." He didn't respond right away, just dried his hands and turned to face me. "And?" he asked. I hesitated. "What if I'm wrong?" I said quietly. "What if I've been too harsh? She's still my mother." The words felt unfamiliar coming out of my own mouth. Marcus didn't interrupt, didn't rush to reassure me. He just listened. "Everyone says you're supposed to forgive family," I continued. "That you don't walk away, that you fix things. And do you believe that?" he asked. I looked down at my hands. "I don't know," I admitted. There was a long pause. Then he walked out of the room. For a moment I thought maybe I'd said something that frustrated him. But when he came back, he was holding his laptop. He set it down in front of me. "I've been keeping something," he said. A folder opened on the screen. My name. Inside it files, screenshots, dates. The first image loaded. My mother's message from 4 years ago. "I no longer consider her my daughter." My breath caught. The second file, her recent email. Warm, polished, conveniently forgetful. The third, a Thanksgiving photo from Victoria's page. 3 siblings. No gap. No trace. "I saved everything Rachel sent," Marcus said quietly. "Every message. Every post. Every time they pretended you didn't exist." I stared at the screen. At the version of my life I had almost started to question. "I knew this moment would come," he added. "The one where you'd wonder if you made it all up, if you were too sensitive, too distant." I swallowed hard. "You didn't walk away from love," he said. "You walked away from being erased." Something in me settled. Not with anger. With clarity, real, grounded clarity. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that simply holds. I closed the laptop slowly. They don't want me back, I said. Marcus nodded once. They want access to what you've become. And for the first time since that phone call from Victoria, I stopped questioning myself. If you've ever had a moment where you almost forgot why you left, where doubt tried to rewrite your memory, stay here. Subscribe. Power moves quietly. 2 days later, Rachel sent another message. No warning this time, just a screenshot. I was in my office, halfway through reviewing district reports, when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. But something told me not to. I opened the image, and there it was again. The family group chat. The one I hadn't been part of in 4 years. My mother's name at the top. Her message was recent, sent the night before. Wonderful news. Ingrid is being honored at the State Teacher of the Year ceremony next month. It will be televised. I've already confirmed our attendance. We'll sit in the family section and join her on stage for photos. I felt my chest go still. Below it, Victoria had replied almost immediately. Already picked my dress. Should I bring flowers? Bradley followed. I'll clear my schedule. Good exposure. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Reading it once didn't feel like enough. Reading it twice didn't change anything, because the meaning was already clear. This wasn't about reconnecting. It wasn't about repairing anything. It wasn't even about pretending to care. It was strategy, carefully worded, carefully timed. An opportunity. My mother didn't say she missed me, didn't say she wanted to talk, didn't say she regretted anything. She said televised. She said family section. She said photos. I leaned back in my chair, the room suddenly feeling too quiet. 4 years. 4 years of silence. Of absence. Of rewriting my life into something more convenient for her to explain. And now this. Not a conversation. A plan. They weren't trying to come back into my life. They were trying to step into a moment I had built without them. To stand beside me and let the world assume they had always been there. That realization didn't come with anger. Not this time. It came with something colder. Something steadier. Understanding. They don't want you, Marcus had said. They want access. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Rachel. Did anyone ask if I wanted them there? The reply came almost instantly. No, of course they didn't, because in their version of the story, my role had never been to decide. Just to fit. Just to allow. Just to make space. I set my phone down and looked out the window of my office. Students were crossing the field in the distance, backpacks bouncing, voices loud and unfiltered. Real. Unscripted. Nothing like the version of family I had grown up with. And in that moment, something became very clear to me. I wasn't going to stop them from coming. I wasn't going to call. Wasn't going to argue. Wasn't going to explain. If they wanted to show up, they could. But this time, they wouldn't get to rewrite the story. That night, we sat around the kitchen table like we were planning something far bigger than a speech. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, listening. Rachel was on video call, her face lit by the glow of her laptop screen. And me. I had that screenshot open again. My mother's message. We'll sit in the family section. Like it was already decided. Like I didn't get a say. You could stop them, Rachel said. Call the organizers. Put their names on a no-entry list. I shook my head. And then what? I asked. I become the story. The daughter who banned her own mother from an award ceremony. That's not fair, she said. I know, I replied quietly. But it's predictable. Marcus nodded slightly. They'd use it, he said. Flip it. Exactly. That's how it had always worked. If I reacted, I was the problem. If I stayed silent, they controlled the narrative. So this time, I chose something different. I'm going to let them come, I said. Rachel blinked. What? I'm not going to confront them before. I'm not going to warn them. I'm not even going to acknowledge it. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Then what are you going to do? He asked. I took a breath. And for the first time since reading that message, I felt completely steady. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. Rachel frowned. Like, expose them? No. I shook my head again. I'm not reading screenshots on stage. I'm not calling them out by name. I'm not turning it into a scene. Then what does that look like? She asked. I looked down at my hands for a moment. then back up. When I give my speech, I said, I'm going to thank my family. Marcus watched me carefully. And, he prompted, and I'm only going to name the people who were actually there. The room went quiet. Rachel's expression shifted slowly. You mean Marcus and Lily? She said. I nodded. That's it. No mention of your mom? She asked. No. Victoria? Bradley? No. Marcus studied me for a long second. You're not going to say anything about what they did? He asked. I reached for my phone and turned the screen toward them. My mother's message stared back at us. I no longer consider her my daughter. I don't need to repeat it, I said calmly. She already said everything that matters. Silence settled over the table again, not heavy this time. Clear. Rachel exhaled slowly. That's going to say a lot. It will, I said, because absence speaks, especially when it replaces expectation. And if she tries to come on stage anyway? Rachel asked. A small smile touched the corner of my mouth. Then I'll remind her, I said gently, that I'm just honoring the boundaries she set. Marcus let out a quiet breath, something between relief and admiration. That's not revenge, he said. No, I replied. It's not. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to stand still and let the truth speak without raising my voice. 3 days before the ceremony, my phone rang while I was reviewing district budgets. The name on the screen made me sit up straighter. Dr. Eleanor Hart. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Dr. Hart, I answered. Ingrid, she said, her voice as steady as I remembered. We need to talk. Something in her tone told me this wasn't just a courtesy call. What happened? I asked. There was a brief pause. Someone contacted the event coordinator last week, she said. A Margaret Fairbanks. She identified herself as your mother. My grip tightened around the phone. Of course she did. What did she want? I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't surprise me. She requested to be included in the program, Dr. Hart said carefully. Specifically, she asked for a few minutes during the family remarks portion. She said she wanted to speak about raising you. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of shock. Out of recognition. She wanted a microphone, I said quietly. Yes. A breath passed between us. I declined the request, Dr. Hart continued. Immediately, I let out a slow exhale. Thank you, I said. I assumed, she added gently, that if you wanted her involved, you would have said so. There it was. Respect. Simple, direct, without assumption. I appreciate that, I replied. Another pause. This one softer. Ingrid, she said, I don't know your family situation. You've never shared it, and I've never asked, but I've watched you for a long time. Her voice shifted slightly, not emotional, but intentional. You built everything you're standing on, she continued. Your work, your reputation, your leadership. I swallowed. And on that stage, she said, that's what will be recognized. Not your last name, not who claims you, just what you've done. Something in my chest loosened. Not because I needed validation, but because someone had just protected the truth, without needing the whole story. She won't be speaking, Dr. Hart said firmly. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Understood. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand. Marcus leaned against the doorway, watching me. She tried to get on stage, I said. He didn't look surprised. And? He asked. She was denied. He nodded once. That won't stop her from trying something else, he said. I know. And that was the difference now. Before, I would have felt anxious, unprepared, pulled into whatever direction they chose. But this time, I already knew exactly where I stood. Not because I had rehearsed a confrontation, but because I had nothing left to prove. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notepad in front of me. My speech. The words that would carry everything I had built. For a while, I just stared at the page, not searching, not struggling, just letting it settle. Then, slowly, I picked up my pen, and I began to write the only version of the truth that still belonged to me. I didn't write the speech all at once. I wrote it in pieces. Between dishes and laundry, between emails and lesson plans, in the quiet spaces after Lily fell asleep and the house softened into night. I didn't try to make it impressive. I didn't try to make it perfect. I just tried to make it true. The first line came easily. When I started teaching 15 years ago, I didn't know if I would last a year. That part was honest. I thought about those early mornings. The exhaustion, the doubt, the moments I questioned everything. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I wrote about the students. The ones who struggled to read. The ones who stopped raising their hands. The ones who needed someone to stay long enough to see them. I wrote about showing up. About consistency. About how quiet work often goes unnoticed but still matters. Then I paused. Because I knew what came next. The part they would be waiting for. The part where I thanked my family. I sat there for a long time, pen hovering above the page. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt that old pull. The instinct to soften things. To include them anyway. To avoid discomfort. To make it easier for everyone else in the room. That instinct had lived in me for years. But it didn't belong there anymore. So I wrote something different. I want to thank my family, the ones who stood beside me, who stayed when it was easier to leave. I paused again, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to feel it fully before I wrote their names. Marcus, Lily, that was it. No hesitation, no qualifiers, just truth. I set the pen down and leaned back in my chair. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sharp, but it was complete. From the living room, I could hear the low hum of the television, Marcus flipping through channels without really watching anything. The normal sound of a normal night. "Done?" he called out. "Yeah," I replied. He walked in, glanced at the paper, didn't read it. He didn't need to. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I am. And I meant it. Not because everything was resolved. Not because the past had changed, but because for the first time, I wasn't shaping my words around someone else's expectations. I wasn't leaving space for people who had already chosen to leave me. I was telling the truth, fully, quietly, without asking for permission. The next morning, I folded the speech and placed it in my bag. Not like something fragile, like something finished. Because whatever happened at that ceremony, I already knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going there to be seen by them. I was going there, as myself. The morning of the ceremony felt strangely calm, not exciting, not overwhelming, just clear. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the sleeve of my navy dress, smoothing out a crease that didn't really matter. Marcus stood behind me, tying his tie without rushing, like this was any other day. "You ready?" he asked. I looked at my reflection for a moment, not searching for confidence, just checking if I recognized the person standing there. "I am," I said. Lily ran into the room a second later, her yellow dress slightly crooked, one shoe already on, the other in her hand. "Mom, do I look fancy?" she asked. I knelt down, fixing the strap of her shoe. "You look perfect," I told her. And I meant that too. Not because of the dress, because of the way she stood unafraid, unfiltered, completely herself. The drive to the state capitol was quiet, not tense, not filled with rehearsed conversations, just the kind of silence that comes when there's nothing left to debate. When we arrived, the building rose in front of us, white columns, wide steps, something that once might have intimidated me. But not today. Today, it was just a place. Inside, everything moved with quiet efficiency. Registration tables, name badges, staff members guiding people into the chamber. "Ingrid Fairbanks Webb," the volunteer said, handing me my badge with a warm smile. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied. "Your family must be so proud," she added. I held her gaze for a second. "They are," I said. And this time, it didn't feel like something I had to explain. We were guided to the front row. Reserved seating. Marcus, on my right. Lily on my left, her feet not quite touching the floor, swinging slightly as she took everything in. "Mom," she whispered, tugging my sleeve. "Is that your name?" I followed her gaze. A large banner stretched across the stage. Virginia State Teacher of the Year, 2024, Ingrid Fairbanks Webb. My name. Clear, centered, unavoidable. I squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah," I said. "That's me." And then, I felt it. Not fear, not nerves, something else. Awareness. The quiet shift in the room behind me. The subtle movement. The presence I didn't need to turn around to confirm. They had arrived. Right on time. Dressed for the moment. Ready to be seen. I kept my eyes forward. Because this time, I wasn't the one being watched. I was the one who chose what would be seen. I heard her before I saw her. That voice. Polished, controlled, used to being listened to. "Excuse me, that's my daughter up there. I need to be in the family section." The words carried just enough to turn a few heads nearby. I didn't move, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge it, because I already knew. Marcus's hand rested lightly against the back of my chair, not holding, not stopping me, just there. Lily leaned closer to me, her small shoulder brushing mine. The room settled again after a few seconds, but the energy had shifted. Then came the footsteps, measured, confident. And just like that, they were there. Second row, directly behind us. My mother, Victoria, Bradley, Carolyn. All of them dressed exactly the way you'd expect. Tailored, composed, ready for a camera that hadn't even turned toward them. I caught a glimpse of them in the reflection of a glass panel near the aisle. My mother's posture was perfect. Victoria's red dress stood out against the neutral tones around her. Bradley sat slightly forward, scanning the room like he was already calculating angles. They looked like a family. They always did. That was never the problem. The problem was what it took to maintain that image. "I'm Margaret Fairbanks," my mother said to the woman sitting beside her. Ingrid's mother. There was pride in her tone. Possession. "I raised her," she added. I let that sit behind me without reacting, because correcting her in that moment wouldn't have changed anything. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Ingrid," she said, her voice low but deliberate, "you look well." I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Out of decision. A hand touched my shoulder lightly. "Bradley, aren't you going to say hello to your family?" he asked. I turned my head just enough for my voice to carry. "My family is sitting right next to me," I said. Then I faced forward again. No emphasis, no edge, just truth. The kind that doesn't need to be repeated. Behind me, there was a pause, a small one, but noticeable, because for the first time, the version of the story they had prepared didn't match the reality they had stepped into. The lights dimmed slightly as the program began. A quiet signal for attention. Dr. Eleanor Hart walked toward the podium. The room shifted with her, focus returning to where it belonged. And for a moment, everything behind me faded, because what was about to happen next had nothing to do with them, and everything to do with the life I had built without them. Dr. Eleanor Hart adjusted the microphone with the same quiet precision I remembered from years ago. No rush, no performance, just presence. "In 15 years working in Virginia's education system," she began, "I've met many extraordinary educators." Her voice carried easily across the chamber. Clear, grounded. "But today," she continued, "I want to talk about someone who didn't just do the work, she stayed with it." I felt Marcus's hand rest gently against mine. Not to steady me, just to remind me I wasn't alone. Ingrid Fairbanks Webb began her career in a small, rural classroom, Dr. Hart said. Limited resources, long hours, and a choice she made very early on to invest in students who had been overlooked. I heard a faint shift behind me, fabric moving, someone adjusting in their seat. I didn't turn. Over time, she continued, her work didn't just impact a classroom, it changed outcomes across an entire district. Literacy rates improved, retention strengthened. Programs she built are now being adopted statewide. There was a pause, not for effect, for weight. Ingrid didn't build this through recognition, she said. She built it through consistency. My chest tightened slightly. Not from nerves. From something quieter. Being seen. Accurately. She pursued her master's degree while teaching full-time, Dr. Hart added. She stepped into leadership not for status, but because she understood what students needed. Another pause. Then, and she built a family. The words landed differently. I felt Lily shift beside me, her small hand reaching for mine. Her husband, Marcus Webb, Dr. Hart said, who has served his community with integrity. And her daughter Lily, who told me backstage that her mother is the best teacher in the world. Soft laughter moved through the room. Warm. Genuine. I didn't need to look behind me to know what hadn't been said. No mention of Margaret Fairbanks. No acknowledgement of Victoria or Bradley. No space offered for a narrative that didn't belong. Just truth. Complete on its own. "Please join me," Dr. Hart said, her voice lifting slightly, "in welcoming your 2024 Virginia State Teacher of the Year, Ingrid Fairbanks Webb." The applause rose slowly, then fully. I stood, smoothed the front of my dress once, not out of nervousness, just habit, and walked toward the stage. Each step felt steady, measured, earned. I didn't look back. Not once. Because for the first time, there was nothing behind me that needed my attention. The podium felt smaller than I expected, or maybe the room felt larger. 500 people, rows of educators, cameras positioned just far enough away to capture everything without being intrusive. And somewhere behind me, my past, sitting upright, waiting to be included. I adjusted the microphone slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Hart," I began. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me, just a little. "And thank you to the Virginia Department of Education, and everyone here who continues to show up for students every day." I let my eyes move across the room, not searching, just acknowledging faces that understood the work. The long hours, the quiet victories no one outside a classroom ever sees. "When I started teaching 15 years ago," I continued, "I didn't know if I would last a year." A few knowing smiles, soft nods. Because they knew. The hours were long, the resources were limited, and there were moments I questioned whether I had chosen the right path. I paused briefly. Not for drama. For truth. "There were people," I said carefully, "who didn't understand why I chose this work." Silence settled. Not heavy, focused. "But teaching was never about proving anything," I continued. "It was about showing up for the students who needed someone to stay." I spoke about the classroom, about the students who struggled to read, about the ones who stopped trying because no one had stayed long enough before. I spoke about consistency, about presence, about what it means to commit to something that doesn't always reward you publicly. And then, I reached the part I had already written, the part I had already decided. I let my eyes move toward the front row. Marcus, Lily, exactly where they belonged. "I want to thank my family," I said. Behind me, I felt it. That shift, expectation rising, waiting. "My husband, Marcus," I continued, my voice steady, "who believed in me when I was still learning how to believe in myself." I saw his expression soften. Not pride. Something quieter. Recognition. "And my daughter, Lily," I added, "who reminds me every day what unconditional love looks like." Lily smiled, small but bright, her feet still not quite touching the floor. I paused. That was it. No additions. No adjustments. No reaching backward. Just forward. Behind me, the silence changed. It stretched. Not confusion. Not yet. More like a moment where something didn't align. Then, a chair moved. Sharp, sudden. "Ingrid," my mother's voice, clear enough to carry. I didn't turn. "Ingrid, sweetheart," she continued, louder now. "You forgot to mention your mother." There it was. The version she had prepared. I let a breath pass. Then I spoke. Calm, even, amplified through the microphone. "You said you no longer considered me your daughter." The room shifted instantly. A ripple, subtle but unmistakable. "4 years ago," I continued, "you wrote that I chose a lowly teacher life and that I was no longer part of your family. No raised voice. No added weight. Just the words. Exactly as they had been given to me. I'm simply honoring that decision." Silence followed. Real silence this time. The kind that lands in a room and stays. I finally turned slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge her presence without stepping into it. "The family I thank today," I said, "is the family that stayed. No more. No less." Then I faced forward again, hands resting lightly on the podium. Not shaking. Not clenched. Just steady. And for the first time in years, nothing about that moment felt uncertain. For a moment no one moved. Then somewhere in the room, a single pair of hands began to clap. Slow, deliberate. It spread quietly row by row until the entire chamber was standing. Not loud at first, but steady. The kind of applause that doesn't chase drama, it recognizes truth. I didn't look back at my mother. I didn't need to. Whatever she had come for that moment, that image, that control, it wasn't hers anymore. Marcus squeezed my hand when I stepped down. Lily wrapped her arms around my waist like nothing complicated had just happened. And maybe, to her, it hadn't. Maybe love really was that simple. If you've ever had to walk away from people who only loved the version of you they could control, let me know where you're listening from and tell me if Ingrid did the right thing.